Commission's statements on the conclusions of the European Council meeting of 9th and 10th of March, including the Rome Declaration. Before we hear from the speakers, I would, on behalf of the European Parliament, like to thank the President of the European Council, Donald Tusk, and the President of the European Commission, Jean-Claude Juncker, the Prime Minister of Italy, Paolo Gentiloni, and the Deputy Prime Minister from Malta, Louis Grech, for having accepted the invitation to take part in today's debate on the future of Europe. I would like to recall that today in the Netherlands people are voting, and no one can offend a country going to the elections offending the values we all recognize. We are more than a simple currency or a market, and it's on that basis that we have to start again, and that's why today's debate is of particular importance. We cannot simply have a formal ceremony to recall the best 60 years of free Europe. The anniversary of the signing of the Treaty of Rome must first and foremost be an opportunity to bring Europe closer to its citizens. We have to give specific responses to unemployment, youth unemployment in particular, terrorism and migration, by promoting our values in the world. The Parliament has opened this debate with the adoption of the Brok and Verhofstadt reports in the last plenary in Strasbourg. 2 weeks ago, the Commission presented its white paper, and the last European Council, the heads of state and government, had a broad-ranging debate on this. On the 25th of March in Rome, a declaration, a solemn declaration, will be signed. Now, more than ever, what we need is unity in Europe. We need to change the Union, indeed, but we must not weaken it. And I would like to immediately give the floor to the President of the Council, Donald Tusk.
Grazie. Dear President Tajani, dear Prime Ministers, Prime Minister Gentiloni, Deputy Prime Minister Grech, dear President Juncker, dear members of the European Parliament. Leaders met last Thursday for the March European Council and a day later at 27 to discuss the future of the European Union before the 60th anniversary of the Treaty of Rome. Our discussions were constructive and focused, despite a little drama at the beginning. I will start with the European Council meeting itself. Following an implementation report from Prime Minister Muscat, we discussed the progress on our migration priorities as set down by leaders in the Malta Declaration of the 3rd of February. Work has begun, but now we need to accelerate in order to start delivering results ahead of what we know will be a challenging summer. Secondly, leaders discussed the prospects for the EU and euro area economies, together with the President of the European Central Bank. Things are getting better, and they are getting better in every member state of the Union. This proves that our economic strategies are on the right track. Although unemployment is at its lowest level since 2009, leaders were clear on the need to get it down further, particularly in the most affected regions. Job creation will remain our priority. It is the best means to tackle inequality and social injustice. Leaders confirmed the EU's position as the champion of open, rules-based, free and fair trade. Trade is central to European economic success, and as I mentioned several weeks ago, Europe needs to intensify trade talks with our partners around the world, not least due to signs of protectionism emerging elsewhere. We agreed to swiftly advance ongoing negotiations, such as with Japan, which are most advanced, with Mercosur and Mexico. Already next week we will discuss with President Juncker how to progress in our trade deal with Japan when we host Prime Minister Abe in Brussels. Our sincere hope is to finalise these talks this year. Leaders expressed their will to strengthen trade relations with China. At the same time, we will not hesitate to defend ourselves against unfair trading practices wherever necessary. We welcome the European Parliament's strong commitment to making quick progress on the relevant legislation. It will help Europe set the global standards for free and fair trade. In the evening, we discussed the tense situation in the Western Balkans. It was clear to all that forces inside and outside are working vigorously to destabilize the region. That is why leaders reaffirmed their unequivocal support for the Western Balkans and its European perspective. We also expressed our full commitment to support EU-oriented reforms and ongoing projects. The European Union remains faithful to the promise of Thessaloniki and fully committed to the region's stability and prosperity. I hope this positive signal from Europe will be heard. Leaders also reviewed progress made in the area of security and defence cooperation, where the European Council gave a new impetus last December as a strategic priority. Leaders agreed to come back to this again in June. Dear members, on Friday we met informally at 27 ahead of the 60th anniversary of the Treaty of Rome. There was an honest and constructive discussion about our common future. It focused on what should be the main elements of the Rome Declaration and our agenda going forward. It was clear from the debate that the unity of the 27 will be our most precious asset. Our last meeting in Malta, subsequent opinions voiced by some member states, as well as the European Commission's white paper, leave us in no doubt that the idea of a multi-speed Europe will be one of the discussions ahead of the Rome anniversary. And I understand the reasons for this. Some expect systemic changes that would loosen intra-EU ties and strengthen the role of nations in relation to the community. Others, quite the opposite, are looking for new, deeper dimensions of integration, even if they would apply only to some member states. Such a possibility is indeed foreseen in the treaties currently in force. However, considering the interest of the community of 27 countries in the context of the upcoming Brexit negotiations, as well as the long-term strategic interest of the EU, I will be urging everyone to strive towards maintaining political unity among the 27. This is why, when discussing the various scenarios for Europe, our main objective should be to strengthen mutual trust and unity among 27. After last week's debate, I can openly say that all 27 leaders agree with this objective. It was a relatively optimistic discussion about our common future, with a positive approach from all sides, without any exception. As I said after the meeting itself, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. It is our collective intention to mark the 60th anniversary with the sense of celebration and sober reflection that it deserves. Me and Jean-Claude continue to work closely with Prime Minister Gentiloni and Muscat on this, and I want to thank them both for their efforts and dedication. Finally, on my reappointment as President of the European Council, I have nothing further to say except to reiterate that I am really grateful for the trust that has been placed in me and absolutely determined to work with all Member States and institutions to make the EU better and more united. Dear members, Brexit was not on our agenda last week, but let me share two remarks, given that this is our last meeting before the UK triggers Article 50. I will do everything in my power to make sure that the EU and the UK will be close friends in the future. Britain will be dearly missed as an EU member state. At the same time, I would like to stress again that the EU's door will always remain open for our British friends. When it comes to negotiations, we will have no choice but to start the withdrawal talks once the UK notifies. We are carefully preparing for these negotiations in close consultation with Member States and the European Parliament. It is our wish to make this process constructive and conduct it in an orderly manner. However, the claims increasingly taking the form of threats that no agreement will be good for the UK and bad for the EU needs to be addressed. I want to be clear that a no-deal scenario would be bad for everyone, but above all for the UK, because it would leave a number of issues unresolved. We will not be intimidated by threats, and I can assure you they simply will not work. Our goal is to have a smooth divorce and a good framework for the future, and it is good to know that Prime Minister Theresa May shares this view. There is one final thing I would like to say about the Netherlands after what happened over the weekend. The Netherlands is Europe, and today I want to say that Europe is the Netherlands, a place of freedom and democracy. And for sure, Rotterdam, the city of Erasmus, brutally destroyed by the Nazis, which today has a mayor born in Morocco. If anyone sees fascism in Rotterdam, they are completely detached from reality. We all show solidarity with the Netherlands. Out of respect for our friends in the Netherlands, let me repeat this in Dutch. Nederland is Europa and Europa is Nederland.
The Netherlands is Europe, Europe is the Netherlands. A place of freedom and democracy. And it's even more the case in Rotterdam, the city of Erasmus, destroyed by the Nazis, and which today has a mayor born in Morocco. This has nothing to do with fascism. We all show solidarity with the Netherlands. Yes, we are European.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. President Tusk, and another time congratulations for your election for the second time as President of the European Council. Thank you also for your speech. I totally agree with you, as I said in the beginning of this plenary, on the situation in the Netherlands. Maintenant, je donne tout de suite la parole au président de la Commission.
I would now like to give the floor to the President of the Commission, Mr. Jean-Claude Juncker.
President Tajani,
Predseda Tajani, predseda Európskej rady Donald a predseda.
My Dutch is better than yours, but I won't prove it now. I just wanted. No. I have a good passive understanding of Dutch, and when I'm speaking Dutch, it's better than the one of the President of the Council. But I recognize that you made a huge effort to address the Dutch nation. And by the way, following your assessment, I was scandalized by what was said coming from Turkey, on the Netherlands, on Germany and on others. I will never accept this comparison between the Nazis and the now governments. You know, my home country, Luxembourg, was occupied by the Nazis. Our people were suffering. My father was forced into the German army together with his three brothers. If you are establishing a comparison of that period with our times, this is totally unacceptable, and the one who is doing this is taking distance from Europe and not trying to enter the European Union. The European Union is not joining Turkey, Turkey is joining the European Union. I wanted to congratulate my good friend Donald for having been re-elected. It was the first meeting the European Council had in its new building. This new building, I'm referring to this building as being the Tusk Tower. I prefer the Tusk Tower to the other one. And so I'm happy that Donald has been re-elected, because we have not only as human beings, as persons, okay, silence has been re-established. Not only do we have excellent personal relations, but also do we have good interinstitutional relations, and I'm very grateful for that. Things could have happened differently, because my first ambition was to become President of the European Council. Now you are there, I'm here, and it's excellent in that way. I'm the best President of the Commission by comparison to you. You are a better President of the European Council by comparison to me, so everything is okay. I'm happy to wake up the extreme right of the Parliament. Ce que je voulais dire, en fait,
what I meant, what I wanted to say.
Thank you. Nous avons eu au Conseil européen de la semaine.
In last week's European Council, we had an intense debate about the Western Balkans. And I'd like to say here on behalf of the Commission and the Vice President of the Commission High Representative, so somebody who's necessarily schizophrenic, that as a Commission we want to offer the countries of the Western Balkan a European perspective, a clear European perspective. Now, when I said at the beginning of our term of office there would be no new accessions before 2019, that was a sentence that created confusion in the Balkans. But we are still debating and negotiating an accession with the countries of the Western Balkans, which is the most complicated region in Europe, and we need to contribute to its relaunch, and to give those countries all the care that they need. And the conclusions that we adopted as 27, because Poland, for inexplicable reasons, wasn't able to support the conclusions of the European Council. Those conclusions say very clearly what our ambitions and intentions are as regards the Western Balkans. Amongst ourselves, we spoke about the economic situation of the European Union and the Eurozone in particular. We're happy that growth is growing, that unemployment is going down, that the employment rate continues to increase. There is a remarkable creation of jobs, but that we shouldn't be deluded by this. Europe has not got out of its economic crisis yet. The social crisis continues, and we therefore need to give all of these questions of an economic and social nature all the attention, all our attention. I would like us to be ready as a Commission in April to adopt proposals for the social pillars, and then in November in Sweden I should like us all together to hold a debate on the continuation of social policy in Europe. In other words, better form, a more content in the social pillar than there has been so far. And I'd like to conclude that job in November. The reason why the social pillar hasn't had all the attention that some of you would have liked when the white paper was presented is because on the social pillar we're acting in the short term. We're trying to reach a good conclusion on the social debate this year, whereas the white paper is a longer term document, looking in terms of achieving our ambitions by 2020. So the social ambition is for us straight away. It's not a long-term ambition. We can't wait any longer, and it can't wait until 2025. I'm always impressed that when you make a joke or attack somebody else, there's lots of applause in this House. But when you talk about social matters, you're of a timidity that strikes me. We also have, Mr. President, still on last week's Council, we spoke about our trade relations with other parts of the world. And I want to say again that you can no longer say that I am not a free trader. We in the European Union must take our opportunities. The Americans appear to be going away from multilateral free trade negotiations, which is a pity, but it's an opportunity for us as well. Because the more people from Asia or Africa want free trade, the clearer it is that these people want us to take the lead in international free trade councils, and we shall do that. The world is expecting that from Europe, and we need to be there where we're expected to be. So as soon as possible, Donald already mentioned this, we shall be entering into negotiations with Japan. Rather, we shall be concluding a free trade negotiation with Japan. Not under conditions that don't suit us, but under the conditions and with the needs that we have set ourselves. Mr. Tusk and I will meet the Japanese Prime Minister on the 21st of March in Brussels, I think it is. And as soon as possible, we shall be moving in the right direction. And is Mrs. Malmström here? I hope that Mrs. Malmström, before this agreement with Japan is concluded, will meet again with the social partners, because I believe strongly that we cannot simply conclude trade negotiations with governments. We have to talk with the civil society and trade union partners and others as well. On defense issues, I shall say nothing, because Federica is here, and she takes the lead on those issues.
Thanks. I do think that the point the US are making is right. We have to take care of our own defense, and we have to increase our defense budgets. Mr. Trump is not the first one who is saying this. Mr. Trump is the fourth president of the United States I have to deal with. George W. Bush, Clinton, Obama were saying exactly the same. And we made a commitment, I think, in Britain, Wales, yeah, yeah, in Wales, which is part of Britain. We signed a commitment, and we have to respect that commitment. But I'm strictly against this restricted concept of defense. International planetary stability is more than defence expenditures, aid development expenditures, money to be given to the humanitarian action of our countries is as important as military expenses, and I would like to insist on that. Was das Weißbuch der Kommission
This is not on the House's order of business, but it's clear that we have to talk about this white paper. I want to repeat again that this is not a white paper about a two-speed Europe. That's a misreading of it. And if Mrs. Merkel hadn't said anything about that in her press conference before the European Council, then nobody else would have mentioned it either. And this is not a question of a new Iron Curtain between East and West Europe either. What it's about is that we need to be able to move forward in terms of deepened European integration if not all agree to do that. In some cases so far there has been enhanced cooperation, but if you look at those cases, all the new member states, so-called new member states, I don't like that term, some of them were not able to go along. But it's usually the old ones who are not able to go along. There's an example of where all the 2004 joiners were part of it, and the Netherlands wasn't part. So this idea is not in line with reality, and I would like to see everyone in Europe, the European Parliament, the national parliaments, involved in these three debates on the future of Europe. The Commission doesn't want to dictate to anybody. The Commission doesn't want to say this can be, this must be so, and that cannot be so. Europe is more than an internal market, it's more than the market and money and currencies. What we have to push for is a Europe of people. And this narrow view of an internal market alone is not what I'm here for. But these are not the Commission's choices. These are choices which are open for debate now. I don't want to narrow that debate. I want it to be open to all elements, and including all the things that the European Parliament has put in its reports in recent months. Thank you for your attention.
Merci, Monsieur le Président de la Commission. Et ora do la...
Thank you for the participation. And now, Prime Minister Paolo Gentiloni, the President of the Council of Ministers from the Republic of Italy, founding member who signed the Rome Treaty, which is going to be hosting the celebrations and the political events to celebrate the 60th anniversary of the signing of the Treaty of Rome. So Gentiloni, you have the floor. Thank you very much indeed, and thank you to the President of the European Parliament for giving me this opportunity to speak to you 10 days before the celebration of the 60th anniversary of the signing of the Treaty of Rome. I believe that first and foremost, this should be an occasion to remind public opinion, to remind our fellow citizens in Europe of what has been achieved over the last 60 years. Peace, freedom, levels of social protection which, despite all of the difficulties, have been achieved. The single market, that's a success story which has defined the European Union as a calm superpower. And finally, the work that we have done on the cultural front, on our values, on sharing our common
way of life. Recalling these achievements, I think, helps us to think about the future. If we were not to do the first, it would be difficult to imagine what the next years will be like for the European Union. And we need to do this, particularly because we are aware that we are right now in one of the most difficult moments in the construction of Europe, where there is the most uncertainty probably over these past 60 years. Taking us back to the years which ran up to the signing of that Treaty of Rome, where there were difficulties, people pulling in different directions as well, but in a world which is very far removed from that of today. The difficulties come today from the choice made on the 23rd of June by one of the major countries in Europe to leave the European Union, stemming from the fact that the effects of the economic crisis are not working in our direction. It also stems from the difficulties we are facing in coming up with a joint response to the issue of migratory flows. We should not underestimate these difficulties. Some people have even mentioned the risk of 1999, and we are talking about building walls, where, as in the past, we were talking about breaking down those walls. It's a risk that we can and should stand up against. I think if we look to the future, we're all aware of the fact that the European Union can make a major contribution, particularly input into the debate which is opened up on the future of the Union. Through the Berger Beres report, the Brok and Verhofstadt reports, I believe that major input has been provided, running in some way in parallel to the work which is being undertaken by Jean-Claude and the Commission and their white paper, which we welcomed indeed, because it's a very useful instrument to move this debate forward. But it's not only the input to reflection on this, it's also the awareness that there is, at least in the Italian government, that it's only if we have more democratic legitimacy will we be able to provide a response to the difficulties faced by the European Union. We could say, in some way, that co-decision powers enjoyed by the European Parliament have been the major achievement of the 10 years post-Lisbon. And over the next 10 years, the European Parliament, this hemicycle, can be one of the leading forces towards the future of Europe. And I do hope that all of us here will jointly share that view. The Rome Declaration is intended to provide a message against this backdrop of trust in Europe and the next 10 years. The Italian government is in favour of relaunching the Union, and the declaration, as always, will be a compromise between ambitions, different expectations and requirements. But certain choices have to come across loud and clear. This is something we discussed in Malta, and then just a few days ago again in Brussels. First and foremost, we have to respond to the question of growth, investment and jobs. If we don't emerge from the crisis, if we don't bring down the levels of unemployment, youth unemployment in particular, which exist within our Union, in certain member states in particular, we can have no trust in the future of the Union. And I also share the commitment to the security of our borders. A common strategy also is needed to manage migratory flows. Those countries that are on the front line in managing the migratory flows, if they're left on their own, there can be no confidence, no trust in the future of the European Union. Thirdly, we have to strengthen our role in the world by taking specific steps towards common defense. That's something which was just mentioned by the President of the Commission. If we bow to nationalism, the facing up against each other of individual member states, also within the European Union, there can be no confidence, no trust in the future of the European Union. And finally, the central focus has to be on social Europe, protecting the weakest, our dialogue with the social partners, as mentioned by Maria João Rodrigues in her report. If we leave the weakest on the sidelines, there can be no trust, no confidence in the future of the European Union. Members of the European Parliament, these are principles that we have to work upon step by step. We don't have the conditions right now to make a major institutional leap forward. But right now, we have to establish a solid Europe, a Europe which is ready to come back to its starting positions. We can make certain steps with enhanced cooperation as established by the treaties. And I would like to say this loud and clear here in the hemicycle in the European Parliament. We cannot have a first-class and a second-class Europe, a Europe of the small countries and a Europe of the big countries, a Europe of the East and a Europe of the West. We all have our own levels of ambitions. We can all choose to take part. We can do that now, we can do it in the future, in types of enhanced cooperation, and everyone will be involved in this common project. That said, Europe cannot stand still. It has a duty vis-à-vis its own citizens to provide answers to the urgencies, the emergencies and the challenges which lie before us. More democracy with citizens and their elected representatives at the centre, and a stronger guarantee to ensure that this common project can move ahead over the next 10 years. As Jean Monnet said, we basically are not bringing states together, we are uniting people, and in this we count on you. Thank you.
Passiamo ora agli interventi.
Now we come to the speeches on behalf of the political groups, starting with Manfred Weber. No, sorry, on behalf of the Council, Mr. Grech has the floor.
President Tajani, President Tusk, President Juncker, Prime Minister Gentiloni, dear members, dear colleagues. As pointed out by previous speakers, the European Union is not about Brussels. It is not about Strasbourg, nor is it about the institutions to which many of us involved in today's debate belong. The European Union is about its 500 million citizens and about their hopes, their fears and their aspirations. Malta's presidency is taking place within the context of a major political and economic upheavals that we have witnessed in recent years, including Britain's decision to leave. Brexit is an unfortunate reality, but we have to move on. We cannot allow Brexit, no matter how much the headlines as it may be, and how complex and delicate it is, to distract us from and create wedges in our central mission. Talk of an existential crisis has become the norm. Yes, we are living in times of extraordinary unpredictability, and it would be a big mistake to underestimate the major setbacks and challenges, but it would be an even bigger mistake to fall into a negative mindset and resign ourselves to doing nothing. The buck stops with us. Never has there been a more important time for Member States and the institutions to remain united. Never has there been a crucial time for all of us to focus on the big picture and shut out potentially distracting, unnecessary, divisive issues. We must face up to the reality that Europeans' horizons have shifted. Many feel disenfranchised or disillusioned. It is up to us to show why European value added can be tangibly translated into citizen value added. As Presidency, our overarching theme is reunion. A reunion which fosters a climate in which the Union can once again regain the trust and confidence in the European project and secures its strong and viable existence. At this critical moment, we have to avoid unnecessary divisions and internal strife. And we have deliberately steered the debate on Europe's future in this direction. We must rethink our priorities, rethink what resources we put into various policies, and usher reform where necessary. Having said that, reform does not mean a whole redesign of Europe. We have the Commission's White Paper, as well as a number of Parliament reports on Europe's future. Some options to me seem to be more attractive than others. And who knows, there may be other options which have not yet been brought to the table. However, I also do believe that whichever way we eventually choose to go does not create first and second class citizens or results in knee-jerk reactions or quick fix solutions, which foster unnecessary tensions and distrust. This could pave the way for the eventual erosion of the unity. Irrespective of whether Member States opt to drive in second, third or fourth gear, neutral is not an option. We must use as a basic platform the established principles, respect for human rights and dignity, freedom, equality and rule of law. These are the values that reflect the soul of the Union and form the core of any future Europe. I think I should rephrase that, most of us believe in a future Europe that upholds the fundamental value of solidarity on issues like migration, and in a Europe that strives to guarantee the safety and security of its citizens. We believe in creating better conditions for growth, jobs and for higher living standards through the Union's single market, and the current indicators show that we have once again started to register successes. We believe that the Union should be robustly positioned to shape and manage better globalization, not merely react to it. A strong Europe is needed to bring about the right balance in a world order which is shifting. We believe in a Europe that fights for a healthy environment. Yet, Europe will only be viable if it is socially responsible, equitable and just, and if it is significantly moulded from bottom up, not from top down. And make no mistake that Europe will only be credible if it delivers on its decisions. In Rome, Member States will reaffirm our commitment to a united Europe. But the declaration is not an end in itself, far from it. Any progress registered on the future of Europe must be followed up and translated into action. A coordinated action by the institutions is absolutely vital. Having spent almost 9 years myself in this institution, I know how crucial and meaningful the Parliament's continuous role and participation is in this defining moment for the future shaping of the European project. Colleagues, we need to draw on this momentum and galvanise and energise our forces to forge a stronger, better Union. We have a fragile balancing act to follow, a balance between flexibility, which is not so loose as to threaten the meaning of a real union, and intransigent rigidity, which would undermine the whole process of the European project. We believe that success belongs to those who can harness positive forces that unite rather than divide. We believe in a better Europe, our youth believe in a better Europe, and we believe that the Union has what it takes to move forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Grech, for your speech. E ora passiamo agli interventi dei gruppi. Il
We now move to speakers from the groups. First and foremost, Mr. Weber on behalf of the European People's Party.
Minister.
President, Prime Minister, welcome, and first thanks to Prime Minister Gentiloni for taking the time before the Rome celebrations to come and listen to us in the European Parliament. That's a good sign of partnership. First of all, I'd like to congratulate Donald Tusk on his re-election. He's done an excellent job for 2.5 years. It was time for bringing people together, not splitting them, to show effectiveness and not build up blockades. That's been strongly the message of 2.5 years, and once again, congratulations on your re-election. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm not going to comment on the first hour of Thursday's Council meeting, otherwise the Polish press will say that this is all a German celebration here. What I'd like to do is to thank the socialists, because Hollande said to the European Council that he valued Donald Tusk's work, and Muscat said that the management was extremely good. The socialists have shown that it's not the time for party politicking. It's a time for us all to stand together and defend European values, and I'm grateful to you for that. Ladies and gentlemen, today we're talking about the Council, but above all the Rome Declaration about the future of Europe. For us, it's first of all a question of powers. Jean-Claude Juncker's ideas are good. An open debate is good. We're pragmatic. We can see some new areas for action, like defense and foreign policy, but there are a lot of areas where we as an EPP group think that Europe should hold back. Jean-Claude Juncker has done a lot defending the idea that we should entrust more to the member states. But frankly, I think that that is not the central debate. It's an important debate, but not the most important debate. What's much more important is how we manage to ensure that people in Europe finally regard Strasbourg and Brussels as a normal political level for Europe, not some external force that forces them into things they don't like. What do we need for that? Well, the first thing we need is to be responsible, to accept responsibilities. In my own country, the German federal government recently, in 140 decisions in the European Council, voted 140 times in favor out of 148. But then all the German ministers come home to Berlin and they don't explain why they voted for this. And the same thing applies to Italy and the Czech Republic and France. It's called responsibility, accepting responsibility. When you decide something, explain back home why you voted for it. Secondly, we need successes, not just what we say, what we talk about here in the European Parliament. We need to talk about successes at home. Even the people on the extreme right that we have in this House must understand that, for example, Croatia and Slovenia over the last few years and decades since the great change have done much better economically than Macedonia or Bosnia-Herzegovina, which is also part of former Yugoslavia. It's clear to everybody that the parts which are part of the European Union have economically done much better than the ones that are not member states of the European Union. Look at Poland and compare it with Ukraine. It's the same story. These are things that we should be telling people every day and not just booking everything to the credit of the nation state, as unfortunately they tend to at the moment. And we also need to do more for Europe at everyday level. We need executive powers in Europe so that there's not just Greek officials at the Greek border, but Frontex officials. A lot of people in Greece would feel now better protected than they used to, because there is a European force at that border. And we also need to be talking to each other across borders. We were talking a moment ago about the Western Balkans. I'm absolutely in favor, our group is absolutely in favor of a prospect of membership for this area, but the same thing applies for Turkey. I'm glad that our former president spoke about solidarity with the Netherlands, which deserve all our support. But on this Turkey question, we need to consider how things can continue. We need to consider the question whether full membership is realistic after this referendum. And our group would like close partnership, yes, in economic areas, in visas, in student exchanges, but we must be honest and say that full membership for Turkey of the European Union in the foreseeable future is not a realistic position. And we need to say that to Europe's citizens. Colleagues, it's more that is at stake here than a division of powers between the European level and the national level. There's a lot of emotions and there's a lot of responsibilities, and we hope that Rome will represent a breakthrough in that respect, Prime Minister.
On behalf of the Group of the Progressive Alliance of Socialists and Democrats, Mr. Pittella. Thank you very much indeed, President, and congratulations to President Tusk. And thank you to President Juncker, Prime Minister Gentiloni, and the Deputy Prime Minister Grech for having made these important speeches this morning. And in particular, I would like to thank Prime Minister Gentiloni for having so strongly stressed the crucial role of the European Parliament. From your words, I understand the urgent need for clear action to be taken to relaunch the European project. We, the Socialists, are on board. If there's one thing we cannot allow in Rome, it's speaking in a vacuum or using slogans or rhetoric. President Tajani, you know that you can count on our group. But if this final declaration in Rome were to be too weak, it should not contain references, significant references to social Europe and governance of the European area. If that's not in there, we would ask you not to sign it. We would have been happy if the entire Parliament could have been more involved in drafting this declaration through an ad hoc resolution, even though it's true that there have been 3 important reports and resolutions in which our views are put across. But we don't want the status quo. Populism is strong, and populists are strong not only when we are not able to explain our achievements, they're also strong when we look weak or resigned. If we stand united and if we show courage, we can face them down. The magical word of these days, which has been mentioned again today, is speed. But more speed in Europe is not a panacea for all our ills. It's a method. It's not really the strategy. Gentiloni has made some very wise statements today. This method in the past helped Europe because it's unacceptable that a member state can have a veto if others want to move ahead. But it would be a mistake if we were only to focus on speed. Europe's problem today not is 1, 2 or 3 speeds. It's the direction we're moving in, the substance. Let's agree on the direction, where we want to go. What's the approach? And I hope that all member states will drive in that direction, all of the families in Europe. And if some people are not on board, then it's their own responsibility not to be on board, but they can't stand in the way of others. If the direction is austerity, for example, then we're going to run aground. It's the substance which is important, not the method. First the substance and then the method. We have to face 3 major challenges in Rome. Firstly, the unity of Europe, our social and territorial cohesion. We need common, joint social standards, better living conditions, which means a strong social pillar, investment in Europe, which will create jobs through energy transition, a circular economy, digital connectivity for all. And for those people who ask where we're going to find the resources to do all of these things, I would say that tax evasion every year takes millions of euros from the European citizens. That's where the resources are, and those resources have to go back to our citizens. Second priority is collective defence and our external borders. It's not possible to have a market with no internal borders unless we share responsibility for managing those external borders, unless we have a European asylum system. The third priority is on Europe in the world. Well, we've got Trumpism in America, we've got threats to international order, and you said that there are some important countries. I would agree with President Juncker on that. Turkey is really now moving towards an authoritarian kind of approach, and Europe should be a point of reference for people who believe in democracy and human rights. President, the dream which existed 60 years ago, well, it's run into peaks of enthusiasm and then stagnation, but it may seem strange. The longer Europe is threatened, the more I believe in Europe. The darker times become, the more I understand the need for European integration. And I've understood that only if we believe in this project can we change it and save it. I'm concluding now. Compromise on words, ambiguity, fears, there is no place for that anymore. In Rome, everyone should freely choose the camp to which they belong. And then we will move ahead in order to change Europe and to save the European project.
Per il gruppo dei conservatori e dei riformatori.
On behalf of the Conservatives and Reformists, Raffaele FITTO.
Signor Presidente Tajani,
President Tajani, President Tusk, President Juncker, Prime Minister Gentiloni, colleagues, politicians can usually be divided into two categories. The ones who turn up in a particular circumstance when their recipes have been disowned by reality. Some people recognize their errors in these cases and try to change their policies, and then there are people obsessed with ideology who think that they can stick to the same recipes and change reality in line with them. Unfortunately, we run the risk of belonging to the second category. The ship is sinking, and we're talking about what speed it's moving at. And if somebody says there's an iceberg in the way, then he's told to shut up because he's not an expert or he's not sufficiently European. If there's a whole wave of rejection of Europe moving forward, we should be asking ourselves a few questions about why. Blaming the voters is never wise. What we should be doing is asking ourselves why the European Union is not working so well. The present European Union has shown that it can't manage emergencies of medium size, such as Greece, nor very serious ones, such as immigration. With the economic crisis, we need a return to strong economic growth, but the Union has failed beyond that. It's become too centralized, it's too distant from citizens. What we need now is not just the hope that citizens can work together. We need something beyond the dogma of the centralized state that has ever less respect for its member states. But the root cause of all this is the failed policy which unfortunately is still being defended, which is why at the 60th anniversary of the first treaty we shall be calling for certain clear choices. First of all, a new real renegotiation of all the existing rules and treaties covering all the member states of the Union. No further ceding of sovereignty outside the European Union so as to achieve full control for member states. And no to the idea of a single European Minister of Finance. Europe doesn't need a final cage It needs competition between different systems and models so that the countries which can cut taxes and public expenditure and therefore encourage growth can serve as an example and an encouragement to the others. We need a mechanism to strengthen national parliaments so that they can act together and debate together policies for the Union and propose them. The hope and the great hopes of the founders are not going to be preserved by carrying on over the mistaken course of the last few years at greater speed. You can always move faster, but the direction remains the wrong one. We need to turn in the direction of flexibility, more open, more transparent rules, proper institutional geometry, recognizing diversities rather than trying to impose unnatural homogeneity. Those are our proposals. We shall speak for them strongly. It's a clear choice. On the one hand, you can have a weak celebration of rhetoric. On the other hand, you can have a strong and credible celebration, and that will be our choice, because that will show a real future for Europe and for our children. Thank you.
A nome del gruppo dell'Alleanza.
On behalf of the Alliance of Liberals and Democrats for Europe, Mr. Verhofstadt.
Well, Mr. Tusk, my congratulations for your reappointment. Fortunately, there doesn't exist any veto right anymore on this matters of nomination of the President of the European Council. And thank you very much for your strong condemnation of this provocation by President Erdogan towards our Dutch friends, because it's quite cynical that the man who wants to install an authoritarian system in Turkey is at the same time pointing the finger and using fascism towards a number of countries in the European Union. It's quite cynical. And it's quite cynical also that he asked for freedom of speech of his ministers in our countries, while in the meanwhile there are European journalists in prison in Turkey. And we have to make the case that is still a journalist of Die Welt, a German journalist of Die Welt, Dennis Yücel, who is in jail and in prison. And I think the first thing what we have to do with all the European leaders is to recall that he is liberated as fast as possible before he can ask to have freedom of speech in another country. And I think we have to be realistic, and I am in full agreement with what Manfred WEBER has said. It's good that we condemn everything what is happening in Turkey, but at a certain moment, Mr. President of the Commission and Mr. President of the Council, let's be honest. Let's freeze the accession negotiations now. That is the only serious act that we can do to condemn what is Mr. Erdogan doing for the moment. That's the only serious way to do it. When he comes back to reason, I don't know when, then we can return to the negotiation table. But to negotiate for the moment with somebody who is using that language towards all democratic societies in Europe is unacceptable. And that brings me, Mr. Gentiloni, thank you for your presence as President of the Italian Council of Ministers. I will be in Rome on the 25th, but not in the beautiful Palazzo del Conservatori at Campidoglio. I will be in another beautiful place in Rome, the Piazza di Spagna, because with the European movement, with my friend Elmar Brok, with Jo Leinen of the European Federalists, with the Spinelli Group, with the movement Stand Up for Europe, we will gathering there in the Piazza di Spagna, which may be as beautiful as Campidoglio, but because we want to recall not the Europe we got and we had in the past. We want to, in fact, prepare the Europe we need in the future. And what Europe we need in the future, there is already now 4 weeks and 4 months, and I should say already 4 years, this question, do we need more Europe, do we need less Europe? Do we need more or less? I think it's a stupid question. In some cases and in some fields, we need less Europe. We need less bureaucracy. We need less regulation, for example, in our internal market. We need maybe less commissioners, in the future and a small European government. We need no regulation on toilet bowls or on vacuum cleaners, on our bananas or on cucumbers. There we don't, and there we need less Europe. But at the same time, we all are aware of the fact that we need more Europe in a number of other issues. We need a European border and coast guard to manage all borders and do not give this task outsourcing it to Erdogan. We need, for example, a European government for our single currency and a Minister of Finance and a Treasury, because a state can maybe exist without a currency, but the currency cannot exist without a state. That is the reality that we have to see. We need, I think, a European investigation and intelligence capacity to fight against terrorism, not only depending on coordination between national authorities. And I think we need also, finally, a European defence community, a European army to stabilise our neighbourhood, to be capable to do something in our neighbourhood. So the question is not, do we need less, do we need more? We need less in some fields, and we need certainly more in other fields. And what I hope what will happen in Rome is not again producing hot air, because let's be honest, Mr. Tusk, we had La Valletta, we had Bratislava, we are going now to Rome. It's time now to start a process. We're going to not rewrite the treaties in Rome 60 years later. That is not possible. But what we could do is start a process, finally. And not only make declarations like we are now preparing a new declaration. And my proposal, the proposal of the European Parliament, is to start an interinstitutional exercise. The three institutions together, based on what we did with the report of Mario Monti, where we have created a new blueprint for the future budget of the European Union. We did this together, the Council, the Commission and the European Parliament. And my request to you, Mr. Tusk, is that together with Prime Minister Gentiloni, you should launch such a process in Rome. We're going to not wait for the outcome of all these elections in 2017, because there are going to be new elections in 2018 and 2019 in other countries. So if you can do something, is to launch that process. We know that Rome was the first republic. We know it was the first empire. We know it was the birthplace with Florence of the Renaissance. We know it was the start of the European Union. Well, I hope that on the 25th it can also be the city of the rebirth of the European Union. Thank you very much, President.
A nome del Gruppo Confederale.
On behalf of the Confederal Group of the European United Left, the Nordic Green Left, Mrs. Zimmer.
Meine Herren
Presidents of all the EU institutions who joined together today, allow me first and foremost to state together that the situation in the EU is reflecting the fact there's no single woman amongst you. Maybe we could think about that as well. It could be a base for the question as to how the European Union can find itself again, reinvent itself, so that the hopes, expectations, the wishes that brings us together doesn't take us back into a Europe which is a patchwork of nations, that it actually reflects all of that. President Tajani, in the Conference of Presidents, you asked us last week to give you the remit to sign the Rome Declaration at a time when well, only a few of us had something before us, but we're not able to say whether the Rome Declaration really is going to provide the signal that we need. And I really doubt that this Rome Declaration really will sign and signal a new start. Mr. Juncker, I say this time and time again, that we need a signal in this declaration about social Europe. Yes, I understand when you say that we need immediate measures. I would go along with that as well. Immediate measures for a social Europe. There are whole programs there, lists of measures. And luckily, the Parliament has a report on the social pillar in which it made very clear what's needed. But what you could do, for example, and here I'm talking to all of the presidents here today. Establish a declaration in Rome about the European Union, which will sign up to an extended social charter. That would be an initial signal, saying at the same time we are working on this pillar, on this social pillar. Your promises, Mr. Juncker, well, basically the proposal on the social pillar is going to be provided in April, and you're saying that by November we want an agreement. Well, I hope we will have it, because there is no room to lose, because basically this is the question that people ask themselves time and time again, and linked with Brexit as well, it becomes even more serious. If we don't start asking ourselves the question and look at the reasons why so many unemployed people, people in precarious jobs in the UK voted for Brexit, well, it was largely because they had the feeling that they were not getting the answers they need from the EU, not the support that they need. And that's why I'd like to say once again, yes, it's great if at the summit 27 heads of state and government agreed to elect Mr. Tusk as the President of the European Council. It made it quite clear that there are possibilities of agreeing, but it's not enough if the heads of state and government agree just for a brief moment. What we need is for the people out there back in our member states that they agree as well. And there I get the feeling that please, not so many celebrations of the 60th anniversary. Take the 60th anniversary as a prompt to fight for the European Union in which we all belong, that we want to defend, because living conditions for everyone in the EU are something we want to improve. Let's ensure that the Brexit discussions don't lead to a situation for people in particular living in the UK, EU citizens in the UK, that their rights are massively undermined. Let's ensure that the rights of people in Northern Ireland are not undermined, that they're cut off from the Republic of Ireland, that we get a new external border. Let's fight together for that, but clearly with the idea that it's all about rights, clear rights for all citizens in the EU. And please also think again about the Dublin rules that are planned, because for the EU member states on the external borders in particular, that will bring a burden for them which are not manageable, which will make their situation even more serious. Let's discuss this together. Please, let's ensure that the European Union becomes a social, peaceful, democratic union, and if we manage that, you'll have us on your side.
Per il gruppo
behalf of the group of the Greens European Free Alliance, Philippe Lambert.
Voilà. Monsieur le Président.
President, thank you very much for giving me the floor. Mr. Tusk, you're a lucky man. Because, in fact, Jaroslaw Kaczynski, your sworn enemy, wanted your head. And that created the unity among the other 27 heads of state and government. And nobody wanted to give him that gift, so that's how you got reappointed. But your first mandate didn't impress us, because faced with this unprecedented crisis that the EU had to face up to, we wondered whether you were the man of the situation. That is, if you had the leadership or the vision that would make it possible to get to EU out of this tough spot. And, well, I'd like to refer to the letter that you wrote to the heads of state and government before Bratislava on the 13th of December last, because you seem to, well, assess the disaffection of a lot of Europeans to the integration of Europe. Citizens who want to know if the political elite is capable of controlling the government and the processes, which seems to be out of their hands and even to terrify them. And the first of these challenges, well, you talk about migration, and you're right. And you can't get worried when you see the causes of migration, whether it's tyranny, wars, lack of resources, climate change. These causes aren't about to disappear, and your response to that is Europe Fortress, or how to maintain at a distance and push back those who are fleeing hell. And in your letter, you denounce those who are opposed to this concept of a fortress Europe as being politically correct. Is it politically correct, Mr. Tusk, to consider that it's not natural for Turkey, who has 20 times richer than the European Union, is taking in so many more refugees than the European Union? Is it politically correct to denounce the imprisonment of the asylum seekers by Mr. Orban, and without saying anything, is it politically correct to refuse that in 2017 we're going to have even more people dying in the Mediterranean? I think we have to get the member states to respect the rule of law. And the second challenge is terrorism, and you're right again. And I find that what you say is right, because when you say the member states have to cooperate more, of course, in collection and processing of information, you're right. But you can't ignore that some countries see under general surveillance of our citizens the only response to terrorism. Now, you know that in a democracy there are two basic principles. One is the separation of powers, the fact that the judiciary has to be able to control the executive, and secondly, proportionality between restrictions on freedoms and the objective pursuit. Now, these two goals are being defeated, and I can mention France and Belgium. And where are you, Mr. Tusk, to denounce these shifts in the member states? And then the third challenge you talk about is globalization, and once again, you're right. But I really don't understand what you're saying here. Your discourse is incomprehensible because you're reaffirming that free trade and competition are in the interest of the Europeans. Now, when this free trade and this competition weaken public services and our social security systems, when they lower working conditions and wages, when they wipe out tax justice, well, in the interest of what Europeans is this neoliberal globalization functioning? The only Europeans who are profiting from this are the people who hold the capital. The other ones are paying the bill. Mr. Tusk, where are you when instead of pushing forward this logic you ought to be recalling to the head of state and government is shared prosperity? Now, next week, you'll be in Rome to celebrate the 20th anniversary of the Rome Treaty. Now, this could be a celebration of 60 years of peace on this continent if we say this was an exception. And this is a success. My grandparents knew 2 world wars, and I've had the luck not to have known any. But if you want this to be a new departure of a new European enthusiasm, well, the Rome meeting has to be that, where a change of direction will be promoted. We need a fairer Europe that lays down social minimum in all member states and then organizes not tax and social competition, but convergence. And we need a Europe which puts energy transition at the heart of its investments. Of course, we have climatic imperatives, but we know that this meets social needs, energy poverty, health needs. More and more people are ill on our continent of fossil fuels. And then there's an economic imperative, because every year we're paying hundreds of billions of euro outside Europe to buy things that then we just incinerate. And then it's strategic, because who are we paying for these fossil fuels? Well, Vladimir Putin. So we need a Europe that knows how to guide globalization towards social conversion, tax conversion, environmental convergence, more democracy. So I ask you just one question. Will you be the man of the moment? Will you be the man who will take up these challenges? Thank you.
For the group of Europe of Freedom and Direct Democracy, Mrs. D'Amato. Thank you, President. Prime Minister Gentiloni, I'm struck by the fact that the pole star of Europe today is the Prime Minister of the nth Italian government that does not arise from the verdict of the ballot box. The crisis of legitimacy that has affected Italy in recent years is now covering the whole of Europe, and we see it with Brexit. This was a crisis that you caused, the same people who last week at the summit spoke about a priority for the new Europe and are now frightened by the advance of populism. You talk about structural reforms, but the reality is that these are tricks, these are constructs to subject European countries to the diktats of people who haven't got the slightest idea what it means to survive a crisis. You talk about reforming to modernize European economies, but in reality there are member states that have got the lion's share, and there are member states that are the lion's prey. You're ready to discipline any state that tries to breathe under the suffocating weight of the fiscal compact, but nobody lifts a finger when multinationals evade their taxes within Europe. And on the social side, we're leaving the citizens without jobs, the sick without medicine, and the poor without social assistance. And for jobs, what's the recipe? The same precarious private recipes that we've seen in Italy with the Jobs Act. What happened to the Commission's plans about a European citizen's income? But let's talk about immigration. We can no longer accept that one or two countries become Europe's refugee camp. Everyone needs to face up to his own responsibilities. You say that we have to prevent landings, but what do you mean? Are we going to stop once and for all taking part in the wars that cause these flows of migration in the first place? What kind of economic development are you thinking about? What impact on the environment, on health, on the climate? What instruments are you going to use to achieve it? The EFSI, a plan that winks at banks, at financing projects linked to fossil fuels, and finances industries like Ilva that cause death. The fact is that we've already got a two-speed Europe, Prime Minister, and we've got it in Greece and in Portugal. There's a Europe of banks, multinationals, and the fossil fuel lobby on one hand, and citizens' Europe on the other. Citizens who've lost jobs, citizens with no rights. We in Rome we shall be proposing the 5-star white paper, the last chance for a Europe of citizens. Are you going to be answering people out there, people with their problems and their needs, and are you going to stop building fortresses that look like prisons? Because otherwise we'll be facing up to the ghosts from the past, or we'll be suffocated under the ruins of the mistakes that we've been making up until now.
Per il gruppo Europa delle Nazioni delle Libertà, la parola all'onorevole
Matteo Salvini, Europe of Nations and Freedom Group. Thank you, President. Well, I'm speaking to people outside these buildings, people here, people who are listening to us here as well, not those who people are governing the European Union, because they're fake and, we've heard what the Turkish leader Erdogan has been saying. We're giving him 10.5 billion euros right now. If you have even a speck of pride and dignity, suspend the payment of these billions of euros to the Turkish regime. It's not possible to finance people who turn around and try to preach democracy to us in Europe, who say that there are entire countries in the hands of fascists and Nazis. Is that normal? Between one coffee and the next, one aperitivo and the next. Can you put an end to that flow of public money from the pockets of Italian taxpayers and go to the Turks? You can also suspend the negotiations as well, if you like, which you should never even have started, because Turkey is not, will not be, and will never be European unless someone's interested in conducting business there. Immigration. You just can't get your act together. Remember the landings, remember the deaths. The euro, it's a disastrous currency. In 15 years, it's created 4 million poor people, a record of unemployment and a public deficit which is increased enormously. Some people are saying that they're going to take away duties which protect Italian goods from unfair Chinese competition. Well, either you're paid from other people or you're completely mad. Economic sanctions against Russia. Well, they were the only people who dared to go into Syria to combat Islamic terrorism. If we were to await the European government, the European Commission to combat ISIS, we would have them sitting here today with their burqas on, teaching us democracy. But you clearly are quite happy with what's happening. Agriculture. Well, just very briefly, basically you are flooding the stomachs of our European children at tables with Moroccan oranges, tomatoes coming from wherever, Tunisian oil, things coming in from China, rice from Cambodia, powdered milk from Ukraine. We don't know what's in them. I stand up for defending the land, the seas and the food which we produce in Europe. Rather than have this commission which is devastating everything. Right now there are thousands of Italian workers out against the Bolkestein directive, one of the directives that helps the multinationals subject workers, as do the directives on finance, trade and the banks. You are the ruin of Europe. You should be ashamed to go to Rome next week. You should lock yourselves up at home and ask to be excused, because the European dream is mine. It's a dream that I want to leave to my children, and it's been wrecked by you. You're just the dream of the lobbyists, the masons, the multinationals and the banks. And get your hands off this Europe. Leave it alone and leave it for the European citizens.
La parola all'onorevole Dodds.
Mrs. Dodds.
Thank you, Mr. President. As the European Union reaches another important milestone in the 60th anniversary of the Treaty of Rome, I want also to acknowledge another significant event in the United Kingdom. This week, in our national parliament, legislation was finalised, paving the way for Brexit negotiations. Those who wish to delay and distract have been defeated. I am happy to align myself with the remarks made by our Prime Minister in the House of Commons, acknowledging that the triggering of Article 50 will be a defining moment for our nation as we work to forge a new relationship with Europe and embrace the challenges of a new role in the wider world. As the European Union discusses its own future in Rome, it is clear that Brexit will be a reality. It is in the interests of all of us, in the United Kingdom and the rest of Europe, that we set aside our differences and work to make it a new and successful relationship, one of cooperation and partnership in making our people more prosperous and secure.
La parola all'onorevole Niebler.
Mrs. Niebler. Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President of the Commission, Mr. President of the Council, Prime Minister, colleagues. First of all, let me congratulate Mr. Tusk on his reappointment, and I wish you luck in your term of office, President Tusk. And now I must thank you and thank the Commission President as well for what you just said about Turkey. I think our citizens were expecting a clear statement on Turkey. All I can say is that a country like Turkey, which accuses Germany of Nazi methods and calls the Dutch fascists, with hundreds of thousands of policemen and teachers and journalists suspended or sacked in that country or put in prison, that is a country that is not in a position to describe any European country as fascist. Parliament several months ago anyway asked for the negotiations to be frozen, and I think that would be right once again. We need to be thinking even whether the negotiations should be ended altogether. I think that would be an honest reaction to this debate. We're talking about the future of the European Union. I'm grateful to the President of the Commission for his white paper on the future of the Union. I think we in the Member States now are due to make a contribution. I think President Tusk is already getting the first reactions from Member States. Of course, we must all value unity. It might be useful to get more information from you on that. I don't want a European superstate. I don't want a purely economic region of Europe. I want a Europe which concentrates on its jobs, on the things that we can solve in common in Europe. Many people have mentioned this: common foreign and security policy and defense policy, a solution to the refugee problem, fighting terrorism, international trade agreements, looking after Africa as a common policy. That would be important as well. We have to do that. You can't leave the member states on their own to try to achieve this on their own in the long run. That's what I expect from Europe. I'm happy to see this debate starting, and I hope that on the 25th of March we'll have a proper celebration of what a lot of committed Europeans did for us and built up 60 years ago. Thank you.
In questo dibattito sono iscritti a parlare
many members of the House are down to speak in the course of this debate, so I won't be able to concede any blue cards. Mrs. Rodriguez.
President, beyond scenarios, the European Union needs a clear choice. And the clear choice should be to do much better together on the relevant priorities. Therefore, I believe that the real debate to be developed is on whether and how should we deliver on these relevant priorities. First of all, providing our citizens with better working and living conditions. All working people in Europe should count on a clear contract with fundamental rights and full access to social protection. This is a central piece of the social pillar which must be included in the Declaration of Rome. Then we also need to make sure that more investment and better jobs will be delivered with stronger means. And that's why the Rome Declaration must include a full reform of the Eurozone with the banking union and the fiscal capacity. And then we need to make sure that Europe remains a central pillar of the multilateral system and for international cooperation. But we also need to make sure that the next trade agreements will enforce our social and environmental standards. And most of all, the Rome Declaration needs to assert 60 years after the European Union as a powerful political, economic, social, cultural entity, but most of all, a democratic entity. That's why we need to fully involve European citizens and the European Parliament in defining this Rome Declaration.
Onorevole Starbatti.
Mr. Starbatti.
Herr Präsident.
President, I'd like to refer to a sentence in the communique which was mentioned by Mr. Tusk and the President of the Commission, Mr. Juncker, about unemployment in the Eurozone, that it's bad, but it's getting better because in 2016, compared with 2009, unemployment had gone down. Well, that's twisting the truth. If you take Germany out of those figures, the situation is completely different. There has been a drop from 7.6 to 4.1 in Germany, but it's increased from 10 to 12.2 in the overall EU. That's the truth. And if we look at the forecasts of the European Central Bank on growth, 1.8% this year, 1.7% next year, 1.6% in 2019, and if we then look at the productivity and take that out, it changes nothing about the unemployment situation in the suffering southern states. Why did our unemployment fall? Well, basically, the surplus from our country went from 1% up to 9%. Our euro is undervalued, and that's why exports are subsidized. In all of the suffering states to the south, the euro is overvalued, and that's why exports are being undermined. So obviously, politics begins with looking truth in the face, and I would call on you, please, to open your eyes to the true situation.
Onorevole Torvalds.
Grazie, signor Presidente.
Thank you, President.
Let's start with a very theoretical question. I think you can say in logical terms that if you aren't able to solve the general problems, then you are bound to bump into all the specific problems during the ride. And I think this is what's going on in Europe for the moment being. National law in Europe is usually structured in Kelsian terms, meaning that Hans Kelsen, when he wrote about national law, he spoke about Stufenordnung. You have a certain levels of law in every country. This level of law is actually then turned slightly upside down by the treaty, because the treaty follows a different logic. And this is the problem we are bouncing into in every question and every discussion in this House. So we need to be able to find compromises between the Kelsian structure and the structure of the treaty. And this is the challenge we actually have in front of us. And I was the shadow rapporteur of the Berès and Böge report, and I can say that this very problem was the problem we bumped into every single day. And that's the problem you are bumping into every single day in the Commission and in the Council. And then we have a tendency, which is even more worse. We have a tendency to push the real questions over to the neighbour's table and ask him to solve the problems instead of going in for it ourselves. We need to solve this problem to build a future Europe which is sort of functioning and keeping itself together. Thank you.
Ci sono ancora più di 40 parlamentari.
There are still more than 40 members down to speak. Please stay within the speaking time given you. Otherwise, we may greatly delay the votes. Mrs. Anderson for 1 minute.
Thank you. War is a terrible thing. And my generation went to war over discrimination, inequality, lack of civil rights and the denial of human rights. The disastrous partition of Ireland divided people and communities, and there can be no going back to this. Hard or soft borders, the people living in border communities in Ireland will not stand for it. So frictionless or electronic borders don't reassure anyone. The damage that will be done to the peace process in Ireland is immeasurable. Any sort of border that will damage the Good Friday Agreement would tell people that the political process failed. My generation will do everything it can to make sure that the next generation never has to endure what we had to. The EU has a political, legal and moral duty to help us ensure that the next generation is not faced with hard borders or hardship. The Council, therefore, and the Commission, in its Brexit negotiations, must protect the people of Ireland, north, south, east and west, from this English Brexit madness. Thank you.
Onorevole Smith, per 1 minuto e 30.
Mr. Smith, 1 minute and a half.
Grazie, Presidente. Cari colleghi, I represent Scotland within this House, and the 60th anniversary of the Treaty of Rome is somewhat bittersweet from our perspective. It's right that we should celebrate our common values, solidarity, cooperation, multilateralism, the acknowledgement that any problem that we face is bigger than any one country, however big, however small. But it's also right that we should reflect on just how fragile those values and that progress truly is. Trust me, the ingredients of Brexit exist in every one of our European countries. We cannot be complacent. Now, I'll be in Rome also next weekend, in my kilt, marching alongside you, working with you, to celebrate and defend our European values, because Scotland shares those European values, and those values must be defended. And Scotland, colleagues, faces the prospect of being removed from our family of nations against our clearly expressed democratic will. It's not fair. And if the EU is not a community of justice and law and democracy, what are we for? You'll be aware, of course, that this week the Government of Scotland has put the question of independence back on the table. We do that out of complete frustration at the intransigence of the UK Government. President Tusk, where you say that the EU will not be intimidated by threats from the London Government, I assure you, neither will Scotland. We will not be intimidated. We will not be silent within this process. We are citizens, not subjects. We will not be passive bystanders. Independence is one of many possible futures. I believe solutions can be found. We will look to our friends and our allies. Mille grazie.
Onorevole Nuttall per 1 minuto e 30.
Mr. Nuttall for a minute and a half.
Thank you. I'd like to start by agreeing, actually, with virtually every other president in this chamber. Everyone seems to be a president. On the issue of Turkey, Turkey under Erdogan is moving towards a theocracy akin to the Middle East. It has nothing in common with the democracies of Europe, and therefore Turkey should never, ever be allowed to join the European Union. I'm also going to agree with Frau Merkel for the first time, actually, when she spoke about a two-speed Europe coming down the line. It's true. There is going to be a two-speed Europe. There's going to be Britain with Brexit in the fast lane and all you guys going in reverse. But I am going to speak quickly about the Treaty of Rome. Even though Britain wasn't an original signatory, it would be churlish of me not to accept that it was a noble and grand plan, put together by men and women who'd witnessed the Holocaust, who witnessed Nazi occupation and the horrors of war. But they were men and women of their time, as it is a treaty of its time. Because, to paraphrase the Scottish poet Robbie Burns, the best laid plans of mice and men often go awry. And boy, has this gone awry. Because what began as a noble economic plan has morphed into a political monster, egged on by successive Eurocrats who are hungry for ever more power and determined to destroy the nation state. And what continues to amaze me is that you never learn. You talk about an existential crisis, but you say what's needed is even more EU. You are fiddling whilst the Treaty of Rome burns. So what I will say is simply this. I urge caution when you're celebrating next week, because Brexit could trigger a floodgate whereby other countries leave that same treaty you are celebrating next week. Thank you.
La parola all'onorevole Vilimsky per 1 minuto.
Mr. Wilimsky for 1 minute. Thank you, Mr. President. Ladies and gentlemen, if you look at the present developments in the European Union in the light of the Treaty of Rome, what you can see is that it was fine then to talk about peace and welfare and to ensure it in the long term. But somewhere along the line, things started to go wrong. That was Maastricht, which was the wrong idea. Then there was the Euro, then there was Lisbon. And now we come to the present situation where we're aiming at a banking union, an energy union, and more centralism. The time for where banks and multinational concerns started to take control over the European Union at the expense of citizens, and now we have to make the choice for the future. So far we've been on the wrong lines, we've made the mistakes, and now there is a proposal to deepen those mistakes. We've got different speeds, different conditions in different areas where people want it and where democratically there are conditions for moving forward. That is the process that we should be debating now. Mr. Gollnisch for a minute and a half. Please stick to your speaking time.
Thank you, President. Well, before the Rome Treaty, there was the ECSC Treaty, Coal and Steel Community, which was part of the 3 constituent treaties of today's EU. And the result in my country is clear. There's no coal, there's no steel. And then there were the 2 Rome treaties, the one for the European the EAEC, and the result today is there's no longer any automatic cooperation because Germany has given up nuclear energy, so the treaty is no longer in force. And then, of course, there was the EC, which was really an agricultural treaty, which was supposed to guarantee higher prices on the world markets for our agricultural products. And the result came, my country, 4 out of 5 farms have disappeared, and farmers are committing suicide every day. So, faced with this kind of failure, we have to think. Mr. Juncker has made an effort to think, which was interesting, with the 5 scenarios that he put forward for us. And of course, personally, I'd be in favor of the 4th. That is to say, do fewer things, have specific programs where the citizens can look at the cost-benefit. But unfortunately, the scenario of Mr. Juncker are within the framework of treaties that are not really going to make it possible to have that kind of development. Thank you.
Lewandowski per 2 minuti.
Mr. Lewandowski, 2 minutes.
Panie prezydencie, nie zdziwię nikogo.
Thank you very much, President. I'm probably not going to surprise anyone if I say that the last summit is going to be recorded in an exceptional way. It will go down in history books because Mr. Tusk is again the President of the European Council. It was also followed very closely by many countries, and everyone was relieved to have seen its conclusion. The circumstances were rather exceptional, but what won in the end was stability, continuity, and the possibility to gather our common experience. And this is a great value of today's European Union in the times of many question marks and many doubts. And I do think that it is important to mention that, because one of these question marks is today, right now, in the Netherlands. They will elect their parliament. I have seen myself many happy polls after the summit was concluded. And in Gdańsk, in the place where Mr. Tusk was born, the enthusiasm was enormous. It could be comparable to the enthusiasm of football fans when our team is winning. What does that mean to everyone? It means that Mr. Tusk has the support not just of the 27 member states, but also of so many Poles, and Poland luckily remains a normal country. As far as the conclusions of the European Councils are concerned, they of course reflect today's challenges. But we do know that the future of the European Union will be decided by the very near future. So the time that starts right now in 2017 across to 2019, the next 2 years, the elections against the background of Europe. We have our common responsibility to convince the Europeans that the European answer is the question, is the result.
Minuto e 30.
Mr. Bostinaro, 1.5 minutes.
President Juncker, President Tusk, Presidente del Consiglio, Deputy Prime Minister Grech. 60 years after the treaties of Rome, we have an European Union which is much larger, made huge integration progresses, ensure peace, stability and growth on the European continent. 60 years after, we must celebrate the incredible results we managed to achieve, but we must acknowledge that still a lot of work to be done. Ambitions must be our driving force. Vision is what we need today in our member states and the level of the European Union. We need to know that without vision and commitment, without unity and solidarity, we leave the space to those who try to divide us, to promote nationalism and to endanger the European project. Unity and solidarity must always come first. I said ambition must be our driving force, and it's true that this may result in some wanting to do more in some fields, as it is in fact already the case. But our solidarity and unity never be jeopardized. Any form of enhanced cooperation must guarantee that openness, transparency must remain always open to all others who want to join without obstacles of any kind. The entry criteria must remain unchanged, and no moving targets for those member states who want to join at a later stage. Only with this in mind we can ensure successful future of our Union. So in Rome, I hope we will choose between unity and division. Unity, and this should be our major project for the next years. Thank you.
Onorevole Zile per un minuto.
Mr. Zile, 1 minute.
Godātie prezidenti, ja mēs domājam, kā ar šiem
President, when we think about these new future scenarios, thinking that they've calmed the fears of our citizens for the future and those of our neighbours, then I think we would be getting it completely wrong. A Europe of different speeds, well, what's going to happen? How many speeds are we going to have? Just Scandinavia, the Nordic countries, the Visegrad states, the Balkans, and then we'll have a few unfortunate countries who are going to be left hanging. That's going to lead to contradictions, and the single market will be at risk. I think we have to take a good example from cycling. If the leading group stays together, then outriders are overtaken. But if it all falls to pieces, then there are holes in everything and it collapses. Thank you. Mr. TELIČKA, 1 minute.
Presidents, good morning. 3 remarks. First of all, loudly and clearly, President Tusk, I congratulate you on the reappointment. I need to underline, this was not a dictate of Berlin. You had and have a strong majority support in Central and Eastern Europe, among others. And I think you are doing a very good job in mending the fences that we have in Europe. Secondly, on Turkey. Honestly, I think the time has come to say we cannot pursue the negotiations, we should not be freezing them, we should stop the negotiations and come with a new partnership kind of agreement for Turkey. It will not fly immediately, but I think we have no other option. And I say that as a person that in 2004 was one of the very few commissioners that supported opening the negotiations with Turkey. Thirdly, on the scenarios. I think that we should exclude immediately 3. Europe as it stands today. Secondly, internal market, that is disintegration, and thirdly, federation, because the time is not right. We have 2 scenarios, but we don't have to discuss them. We should put on the table the concrete political issues on which we are to have a coherent approach, and then we will see what will fly with eventually complete unity, with multi-speed eventually. Thank you, Mr. President.
Onorevole Spinelli per un minuto.
Mrs. Spinelli, 1 minute.
Grazie.
Thank you. I don't feel like celebrations, so all I'll say is that it's things I would like to see done on this anniversary. I'd like the Union to recognize the mistakes it's made since the beginning of the crisis. I'd like it to give absolute priority to social justice and to a major New Deal. That's the only way that it's going to convince citizens who are more and more put off by our institutions. I'd like the Union to stop calling populists all of those who can't achieve a real change in policy and feel upset and afraid as a result. I'd like the Union to stop unloading onto Africa the questions that we are not able to resolve ourselves except with prisons and walls against refugees. It sounds utopian, but let's not forget that the Union too was a utopia for a few right in the middle of the war.
1.5 minutes to Mr. Giegold. Presidents, colleagues, I would like to start by wishing the Commission, or congratulating the Commission on its white paper. It will help us, I think, to move forward in our debate on the future of Europe. Yes, it's quite true that it's open scope for discussion rather than pointing the way. But with these options, I would be happy if the role of citizens could come more to the fore, because in the demonstrations we've seen how much enthusiasm there is about the House of Europe, and how many citizens don't want to torpedo this project, and the role in Europe, the participation of the citizens, their co-decision. We have to realize that that is part and parcel of these future plans for Europe. I expected more on that in the white paper. Now, the further deepening of Europe, I'd like to say something briefly on that. We're talking about the various options here, but in the meantime, the federal government in Germany is talking about establishing a monetary fund around the ESM as an intergovernmental form of greater cooperation for some of the lender. And the aim is clear. The European Commission, but also the Parliament, should look, obviously, leave them outside in the next steps on deepening Europe. And so, Mr. Juncker, when you look at the plans for the papers from the 5 presidents, and please, I would ask you to go beyond that and make your own proposal for a monetary fund which will protect the situation in Europe and will not feed intergovernmentalism in Europe. Thank you.
Per un minuto.
Mr. PAKSAS, for 1 minute.
Mr. Chairman, I have 1 minute for my intervention, so that's 1 sentence per year of the Rome Agreement. So I'll speak very briefly. Mr. Juncker, Mr. Tusk. Well, not everything was very bad, because we managed to achieve the 60th anniversary. However, if we don't make changes, we will probably not see the 70 years anniversary. Anyway, I would like to congratulate the Union, and I would like to pose some questions that are very important for the European citizens. So how is it that 60 years ago the politicians managed to solve some very important European problems? And how is it that during the last several years many new problems were created, and these problems increases risks of terrorism, of unemployment, and many other secondary problems? Thank you very much.
Atkinson, per un minuto.
Mr. Atkinson, 1 minute.
President, do you actually ever feel like you're in a bit of a groundhog era, bit of a time warp? Because every month I come in here, I certainly feel I do. Mr. Juncker, you talk about Mrs. Mogherini being a bit of a schizophrenic. I'd agree. I think she's a schizophrenic because she's totally out of her depth. And on trade, you talk about talking to civil society and trade unions. Let's just read lobbyists into that. Now, if you do a deal in the City of London and you do a deal in Wall Street, it actually takes weeks and months. And that's where you're failing, because you've put a former sociology lecturer in charge of trade. So therefore, that's why TTIP and the other big deals haven't happened. And Mr. Gentiloni, please don't delude the voters about peace in Europe. It was NATO that has kept peace in Europe and will continue to do so. This week, my group proposed a debate on surveillance, and it was only actually Mr. Lamberts that mentioned it. We asked for the CIA hacking to be on the agenda, but you had political ideologies. You actually voted against us having that on the agenda. What is more important than keeping our citizens safe? And you failed to do that, and that's why this place will fail.
Onorevole Zarianopoulos.
Mr. Zarianopoulos. 1 minute.
Εν ώψη των 60 χρόνων.
The 60th anniversary of the Treaty of Rome is coming up, but this debate today shows one thing, that peoples are expecting even worse. The Union is not of the people. It can't become the people. It's just fraudulent. It's about capital, basically, aimed at exploiting poverty and encouraging refugees and wars. But basically we have external competition, we have fighting, and basically if we further it, if we have different speeds, if we have a strong core, it's all moving in the same direction. The Prime Minister in Greece of Syriza, basically he signed up to the next memorandum now, and We don't obviously want to go along with this. We want to open up a growth path for young people, and we want to fight against the barbarity of capitalism in Europe. Thank you very much indeed.
Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, President. First of all, on behalf of the French delegation of the EPP group, Mr. Tusk, I would like to congratulate you. And we're pleased to see you at the head of the Council again. Now, some people have tried to oppose this as using Europe as an adjustment variable for national political egotism, and that's what our citizens don't want. Now, on the eve of the 60th anniversary of the Treaty of Rome, our European project is at a crossroads. The Council has to fulfill the role which it should have, that of harmonizing the position of the Member States at the service of a strong Europe which is respected in the world. But this political will has to be consistent. Yes, Europe multi-speed is realistic, contrary to the a la carte Europe that perhaps the UK would have liked. And we don't want to exclude. We want to think of it as the only solution so that member states who want to can move forward in private areas. Security, border controls, immigration, defense, economic and monetary union. Let's not live under any illusions. A lot of time has passed with the member states not supporting a Europe that could win. And it's not Mr. Hollande who's going to provide impetus here. Now, he wanted to reorient Europe when he became president. For what result? Well, none. And he's a few days from the end of a catastrophic mandate. Priorities were defined by the Council last week. Well, I would just like to talk about unfair competition here. Defending the competitiveness of our enterprises is very important. And faced with this challenge, we have to have a strong response, and that will not be accepted by our enterprises and their employees, who are the basis of our economy. Now, the single market will provide us with a happy future, and we don't want an unconscious protectionism. In China, they've got a massive economic plan which is being prepared, and nobody is going to wait for us. So we have to act, and we have to implement an intelligent trade defense and promote fair trade in our commercial relations and international relations. Yes, the Union can regain the confidence of the citizens if there's a courageous political will which is realistic, shows what it can do.
Bullmann per 1 minuto e 30.
1.5 minutes, Mr. Bullmann.
Mr. President of the Council, Prime Minister, Mr. President of the Commission, rather representatives of the European Commission, I'm almost tempted to say that those were nice speeches, but consider, this is 2017, this isn't the end of the century. Don't leave the door open to anti-Europeans. Don't talk about it at the end of the century yet, just yet. Have a bit more courage and listen to what the colleagues have been telling us. Thousands of people every weekend are demonstrating for Europe at the moment and for what they expect from Europe. Let's take that seriously. To Mr. Juncker, I would say, in his youth, was one thing. Now he's President of the Commission, he's put on a bit of weight, but Europe, in the meanwhile, is doing things against, and has always been doing things against the interest of its citizens. But let's now say to the young people that you're not a lost generation. But let's give them a youth guarantee. The people in East Europe need this. We need their jobs. They need jobs. They need to be able to say to their families that there's light at the end of the tunnel. Make that as a legal proposal, as a proposal of legislation. But you need not multiple choices, not excuses, but leadership to do that.
Mr. Czarnecki, 1 minute.
Mr. President, President of the Commission, President of the Council, I think that what we need today is a cool head. Today someone said that the EU might not survive until the next anniversary. This person might not be the only one here. That would be really sad. But we have the fundamental question: is the current decision-making method in the EU the right one? Because we have such strategic areas like the climate, like energy, like immigration, or personnel for that matter. And we should go back to why we were successful all those years, to the principle of consensus. And if we are going to fight between the majority and minority, once majority, once minority, we are not going to be successful anymore. Thank you.
Mr. Lambsdorff, 1 minute.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. In Rome, we'll be celebrating 60 years from the Treaty of Rome, looking at the successes of the European Union, which of course are from yesterday, but they're big ones: freedom, peace. The question is, what successes will we have in the future? The central thing is freedom on our continent in a difficult international environment, and we are going to need a strong Europol, a European FBI. We need a strong Frontex, a really European, not an intergovernmental one. We need a common foreign and security policy worthy of its name. And we need welfare, we need economic growth, so that young people in the southern countries get prospects again. And let me say to the five-star people that in Italy for 20 years there's been no productivity growth. But that's not the fault of the European Union or the euro. It's because labour markets and service markets are not liberalised. We need liberalised markets and economic growth so that young people get a prospect. And in an ageing society, that's also the way to ensure social security. The House of Europe shows all this, and if we do free interrail as well, we'll get young people supporting us more.
Per un minuto.
Mrs. Forenza, 1 minute. Thank you, President. I would like to start by reading out various passages from the manifesto, the Ventotene manifesto, which was mentioned on various occasions in our debate on the future of the Union. The European revolution to respond to our requirements should be socialist. In other words, it should emancipate the working classes and create better living conditions for them. That is the exact opposite of what is going to be celebrated in Rome. I listened to President Juncker today as well, talking about strengthening the social pillar in the Union. I'd like to know what he understands by the Union's social pillar. Don't think what the socialist governments in Europe, with the Italian governments, the French governments, have achieved through their labour reforms. What do you mean by a Europe based on human rights when you enter agreements like the one with Turkey or the one with Libya? I would like to invite you, President of the Council, to visit Ankara and talk about the women who talk about illegal detention, torture and rape in Libya. And to conclude, I would also like to say that I believe that in 2017 we cannot intervene as you did in a masculine way. It was all male. We criticised Trump, but maybe I should point out that the Italian government doesn't have an equal opportunities department. I will be out there on the streets on the 25th, don't worry. Thank you very much.
Thank you, President. Yes. Of course, we saw President of the Commission, Juncker, holding one of his ineffective speeches. The best I can say about President Juncker is that he's a nice person with a good sense of humor, but I don't think he's a good leader. And to the new re-elected President Tusk, well, he made a better speech. But I wonder what it's going to mean to. I mean, not even the Polish government wanted to support him, so, I mean, how is the rest of Europe going to trust him? And the reason that he's still there is that he has the right friends. And it's not the elite that you should be friends with. You should be friends with the citizens of Europe, because they want to get a fair wage for their work. And now we're facing a new period. And, well, unfortunately, the normal worker can only dream on proper wages. And the real contact with reality that seems to be lacking in this House will show that this whole project, I'm afraid, is going to fail.
Honorevole Annemans, Peru.
Mr. Annemans, 1 minute.
Voorzitter, collega's, het verdrag van Rome was een vorm van Europese samenwerking.
President, well, the Rome Treaty was a kind of European cooperation which was acceptable. The participants were free states who were cooperating voluntarily to defend their interests and the interests of everyone. The areas and the goals were clear where people cooperated for added value. And since 1957, we've moved on to something which is institutional, which is off the rails until Strasbourg in 1992. And then after we opened up the borders to migration, the Treaty of Schengen, the single currency, we've continued in this same logic, and I think there ought to be new founding fathers that will make it possible to return to an intergovernmental system so that we can avoid the European Union ending up with...
Gracias. Mr. González Pons for 2 minutes. Thank you, Mr. President. Europe in the north is going populist, and in the south there are refugees. In the east there are Putin's tanks. On the west there's Trump's wall. In the past, war. In the future, Brexit. Europe is more alone than ever. It has been, but citizens don't know it. So Europe is the best solution, but we don't know how to explain that to our fellow citizens. Globalization tells us that Europe is inevitable today. There is no alternative, but Brexit also tells us that Europe is reversible, that it is possible to go backwards into history. Although outside Europe it's very cold. Brexit is the most selfish decision taken since Winston Churchill saved Europe with blood, sweat and tears. Brexit is the least solidarity-like form of a goodbye. Europe is the way of living together. Leaving Europe is not leaving a market, it's leaving shared dreams. You can leave a common dream, but if you don't have other dreams, there's nothing for you. Europe is forgiveness between French and Germans. Europe is the return of freedom of Greece, Spain and Portugal. It's the fall of the Berlin Wall. It's the end of communism. It's the welfare state. It's democracy. Europe is fundamental rights. Can we live without all that? Can we renounce all that? Are we going to leave all of that behind for the sake of a market? I hope that the Rome summit will talk less about what Europe owes us and more about what we owe it after all that it's given us. Europe is the only spring that the continent has lived in its entire history. I'm one of those, President Tusk, when Prime Minister May announced Brexit, I started to dream of the day when the British come back again.
Mrs. Fajon, 1.5 minutes.
Thank you, President. The future of Europe can only be discussed if we know what we want. We can allay the fears of our citizens by sending a strong message about a common European Union for which we're prepared to work and that is ready for changes. Now, these changes about different speeds lead away from that. The possibility of different directions of development have caused fears and doubts in Slovenia about what this means for our small country. And how are we to interpret the Polish tactics concerning President Tusk? Or how are we to interpret cherry-picking by some member states on migration? It means that not everybody wants integration in the same measure, but dividing Europe into East and West will be a fateful mistake for our peace and stability. And this will not bode well for the Western Balkans. No isolation, no wall will solve these problems. We need solidarity and unity in order to create jobs, to buy criminality, to fight terrorism and to fight inequalities. And our long-term objective needs to be to reduce social inequality. My Europe is a united Europe, dear colleagues. This is our Europe. And we must work in this direction. We must work to make our citizens safer. And I would ask our leaders to consider this.
Onorevole Van Dalen, per 1 minuto.
Mr. Van Dalen, 1 minute.
Dzięki, Mr. Tusk. Dzięki.
Well, dziękuję, Mr. Tusk. And thank you very much, Mr. Tusk, for your support to the Netherlands that you expressed this morning. Thank you very much. President Erdogan has let certain ministers wage a campaign abroad for his referendum, and that despite Article 94 of the European Constitution, which bans it. Now, the Turkish ministers wanted to wage a public campaign in the Netherlands, and now Erdogan is calling Netherlands fascist and Nazi. In Rotterdam, which in May 1944 was reduced to ashes by the Nazis. President, I would ask Mr. Tusk and the Council officially to put an end to the negotiations for accession of Turkey. Dictators should not be in the European Union. And let's put an end to the pre-accession funds. They've already received billions from the European Union. Let's put an end to the negotiations. It's crazy.
Kiitoksia. Minuutto. And I give the floor to Urban Crespo for 1 minute.
Señorías,
Well, members, the European Council is pushing for continuity not only through the election of Donald Tusk, unfortunately renowned for the sentence, "Don't come to Europe," a symbolic sentence of the institutional xenophobia of the Fortress Europe, which of course is electro gasoline for the rise of the extreme right in Europe. Continuity, emphasizing cuts and moving backward toward a multi-speed Europe, deepening inequalities between the center and the periphery. In a few days, it'll be the 60th anniversary of the Treaty of Rome, an anniversary which finds a European Union in a deep crisis, where neoliberal policies and austerity policies are sabotaging the integration of Europe. Now, faced with this crisis, the answer of the European Union is the militarization through the European Defence Fund, which will only benefit arms manufacturers and their lobbies in Brussels. If we want to save the European integration, we have to radically change our policies, and we can start, as said the historian Perry Anderson, burning the Treaty of Maastricht. Thank you very much.
La parola all'onorevole.
And I give the floor to Rebecca for 1 minute.
Mr. President, dear colleagues, the rooster hasn't even crowed twice from the publishing of the White Charter on the future of the European Union. Then we have seen the two-speed Europe already. The big member states jumped the gun, and they rushed in a meeting to show that the big decisions are taken in a restrained circle. We had the idea of setting up the European Prosecutor's Office by ignoring the countries that voted against it. On the outside, everything looks good. On the inside, only some of the member states are making the law. Now we can see that the ENF group is the only one that is serious about the project of a united Europe of nations that are equal and that function based on mutual respect. It's obvious that from Friday onwards, the stars on the flag of the Union no longer sit in a circle.
Now I give the floor to Mrs. Gardini for 2 minutes. Thank you, President. In a few days, we're going to be celebrating 60 years since signing the Rome treaties, and this celebration should be the opportunity to relaunch the European project. However, if we want a strong Europe, if we want a big European project, then we need to avail ourselves of the instruments that can make this all much more concrete. Europe saw the light of day to bring about wealth and solidarity to its citizens. But today, in a globalized world, where the world's becoming smaller, we need Europe more than ever to ensure well-being, growth and jobs. If we don't reduce unemployment, as we heard from Prime Minister Gentiloni, there will no longer be trust in the future. If we do not reduce youth unemployment, we won't have a future. The debate on the future of the EU should be the debate of young people who feel excluded today and who are excluded. The European average of young persons' unemployment is about 22%. In my country, it's 40%. There are some countries where it's even 46 or 48%. And this has to be the greatest concern of our citizens. It's a concern that in European families is turning into anxiety. And at the top of European concerns, we see migration, immigration. Today, there's the alert being launched in Italy. It's estimated that 250,000 refugees will land in Italy this year, more than 60,000 last year. That was a record. So, Mr. Tusk, it's all very well that you want to say, if you want to go quickly, go by yourselves. If you want to go far, go together. But we feel rage in our communities, and how on earth is that going to lead to hope? It's only if the EU can speed up with actual concrete results. As we have from the Council representative, the EU is its 500 million citizens. They have to be at the centre of our concerns. In particular, we have to ensure that they feel that they're at the centre of our concerns. It's only then that we can get going again. Let's have hope instead of rage, and let's build our future together. Thank you. Mrs. Berès for a minute and a half.
Thank you, President. President Tusk, you were comforted when you were re-elected under pretty exceptional circumstances as President of the European Council, and that should give you strength to become a driving force on behalf of the European Union, beginning by looking into the past. You need to inspire yourself by the Founding Fathers. Obviously, your agenda is no longer that of the Founding Fathers, but nevertheless, by learning from the errors of the past and by looking at what's happened since the Founding Fathers delivered the European Union to us, you should get some ideas. Now, there's one thing that hasn't really been mentioned this morning, and I'm quite surprised, the idea of European sovereignty, the idea of the political union, the issue of democracy, rights and values. Those are what you are the guarantor of, together with President Juncker, and that's what you need to strongly reaffirm during the anniversary to celebrate the 60th anniversary of the Treaty of Rome. But we need to go into more detail here to guide debates, to ensure that in member states where elections will be held, people can say, well, how are we going to respond to the white paper proposed by President Juncker? And we can't simply just have the internal market as a response. A single market has never made anyone dream. I don't believe in just the coordination of economic policies. We've been doing that for 15 years now. We have to move towards more integration in the service of our citizens and the common project. President Tusk, you are here as the President of the Council, here in the House of the European Parliament. Don't forget that when you talk about citizens, that means that the European Parliament needs to be at your side to draw up this Declaration of Rome.
And now I give the floor to Mrs. Van Boswit for 1 minute.
Thank you, President. Colleagues, the conclusions of the European Council are clear. Jobs, security and migration. That's what Europe must focus on. But citizens are fed up with hearing fine words and seeing no deeds. If that is the focus, why are we actually devoting less than 10% of our 2017 budget to security and migration? And that's what we can see too in the context of our debate on the future of Europe. The plans are looking to 2025, but we can't wait that long. Our citizens want action on this now, and we can show them that action rather than replacing 73 British MEPs with a more slimline budget without the UK. We need to focus on strengthening our external borders. We face great challenges, and I'm calling now for action on those.
And now give the floor to Mr. Royal for 2 minutes. Thank you very much, President. President of the Council, Commission. Congratulations to Mr. Tusk. Everyone's already said that, but I'd like to echo that, and I think that confirms your good work. Secondly, as many have said here, Europe is very important and very valuable. We have many important values. That's all right, but I don't think it's enough to just keep saying it. We're going to have to demonstrate that this Europe actually works, and works in favour of the citizens. I'd like to look back. If we look back over the achievements of 6 years, it's peace, prosperity, security, and wealth. But if we're talking about wealth, are our jobs good enough? I don't think the answer should be more social provision or Europe becoming responsible for things it isn't responsible for. I think bringing unemployment down, for example, here we have to make sure the conditions are right for jobs to be created. That is the task for the Commission and for us. What are we doing to actually secure jobs? What are we doing to secure industry in Europe? Now, it's a shame that the President of the Commission has gone together with the Industry Commissioner. But I'd like to know, what are the proposals in the pipeline? How can Europe help with industry? Now, I've known Industry Commissioner for many years talked about a 20% figure of employment coming from industry. We've done that, but surely we need to make sure that the conditions are right so that industry can work. And if industry and growth are in place, there'll be jobs. If jobs are there, people will be happy, and that will be good for the European project. That was an important characteristic of ourselves in the past. People thought Europe was good because people were in a good position. That means they have revenue. If they have revenue, the state has revenue. The state can then pay for social provision. That's clear. Now, it's only if we do well economically that people will be happy. So basically, the Commission has to deliver not just about the social union, but also industrial policy.
La parola onorevole.
Now give the floor to Mr. Kofod for a minute and a half.
Thank you, President, and also thank you so much to both the Council and Commission and others here that has mentioned the importance of celebrating the Rome Treaty, the 60 years of the Rome Treaty, and that we have peace in Europe for a long time now. And I think we shouldn't take that for granted. It's very important to understand and value freedom, our democracy, human rights, our way of cooperating in Europe, where it's the rule of law that is based on our cooperation for big and for small states. But we also have to understand that many citizens, not only in Europe but in the Western world, they now feel under pressure. We see it in the US when they elect Trump. We see it in Europe where in our societies are challenged. We need to understand the root causes for this, and the root causes is that the social contract in many of our societies is endangered. It's endangered by rising inequality, it's endangered by job insecurity, it's endangered by many of the ordinary people on the labour market are under pressure, and there's a race to the bottom on working conditions. So we need a social Europe. We need to attack the root causes for the uncertainty we have in our societies. If we want to save Europe and our democracies, we need to understand that. We also need, I think, to cooperate to stop the race to the bottom on tax evasion and tax dodging by big multinational corporations, rich people, Panama Papers, LuxLeaks, SwissLeaks. We have all of these examples. We need to fight for our values, we need to fight to protect our welfare states, and we need Europe to master globalization in the name of the people now. And we need that message too. Thank you.
Marius for 1 minute.
Thank you, Chair. The leaders of the EU are called upon on the 25th of March to meet in Rome to celebrate the 60 years of the EU. There is, however, a legitimization crisis of the EU itself, which has led to economic decline of the South. It has led the Member States to be divided between so-called creditors and lenders. So the European Union is now a union of the creditors. It is a union where the states are no longer equal. The states that owe money are modern-day colonies. So we have this inequality in the framework of the German Europe, and we see that it is now being made official with the EU of the multi-speed EU. However, the Greek people are not going to accept Greece to turn into a European colony, especially on the 25th of March, which is the day of our national revolution. Thank you very much.
Mr. Casa for 1.5 minutes.
Grazie, Sur President.
Thank you, Chair. We are celebrating 60 years of a history of successes. We have had challenges, and we some of them we prepared for them, but other challenges we were not. We had a Europe that was based on important values, values such as democracy, freedom, justice, solidarity, social justice, equality, and these are important values. We had Europe that was built on these values, that now the people are saying that we need to guarantee these values. It is our duty, as Mrs. Berès said, that we should do our utmost to make sure that our citizens will be able to have these rights without any obstacles by anyone. I agree that we need to fight against corruption, against the abuse of power, and I also agree with what the Maltese Prime Minister said, that we need to do our utmost to strengthen the rule of law. I agree with you, but we should not only say this, but we should practice it always and everywhere. And therefore, if I do and say what the President of the Commission said, that we want a Europe of the people, we need to listen to the people. And the people want us to do our utmost as deputies, as council, as commission, to ensure, to guarantee that these values are not taken away from us. Thank you.
Mrs. Toya for 1 minute.
Grazie.
Thank you. Presidents, Prime Minister of Italy, we don't expect miracles from Rome, but we do expect some things. And as representatives of the European people, I think we deserve something. We want to hear from the Council, the 27 member states, some kind of sense of responsibility and pride, because the future of Europe is in your hands, and you'll have to decide whether to move forward or stand still. And this relates not only to the variable speed Europe, etc., but it also relates to providing various responses to what's going on, but continuing the spirit of Europe. So more democracy, but more social and tax fairness as well. We explicitly want a social Europe, not just a monetary Europe. What kind of sense of belonging can a monetary or banking union engender among the citizens? We need a social union, and that's more than just simply a little bit of the social side. What it means is that European citizens, their concerns and their rights need to be at the heart of what's being done in Europe.
Sugar for 1 minute and a half.
In the debate about the future of the European Union, we hardly talk about further enlargement. However, I'm convinced that this is a particularly important issue for the stability of the Western Balkans. We cannot pretend that we have forgotten about our promises to those countries simply because some people believe that it is not the right time to talk about it. We have to maintain the reality and the possibility of enlargement, otherwise we lose our credibility. Europe needs success stories, and one such story could be the integration of the Western Balkans. It is just as important, however, to reduce ethnic tension and find solutions in the European Union, and it is only possible if the violation of minority rights do not go unnoticed in many European countries. It is important that the very important issue of the peaceful coexistence of various minorities and nationalities should be guaranteed, and it should not be simply left to member states. 8% of the population in Europe represents some minority groups, and Europe should set an example in protecting minority rights. Today, on the 15th of March, we celebrate the 169th anniversary of the Hungarian revolution and freedom independence fights, when people shed their blood to protect their rights. So we should not create servitude and secondary citizenship in Europe. Solidarity should imply fraternity, and we should also include in this debate the issue of Western Balkans. I'm sorry I've been too long, but I've been interrupted.
Chair, President Tusk.
Thank you, Chair. President Tusk, Mr. Vice President Grech, yes, we need a Europe of people, politicians that really know what the people think, because this European Union needs a policy that makes a difference and addresses the challenges of citizens in our villages and towns in all member states. A small member state like Malta, who today holds the presidency, this is important, and we need to speak the language of the people. We need to push forward the social agenda. We need to kick off social reforms that make a difference in our workers, our people, to the quality of life and health environment. We need to give peace, prosperity, sustainability, quality of life that is better for our citizens. We need concrete initiatives that can offer European solutions for the challenges of our citizens. And this is the Europe I would like to see, a Europe that does not forget the vulnerable, that they know and they make sure that it has the trust and that it is not an institution which is remote, but we represent the peoples. Thank you.
Mr. Rangel for 1.5 minutes.
Grazie, Presidente.
Thank you, President. President of the Council, Minister. First of all, of course, I would like to compliment the President of the Council, Donald Tusk, on his re-election, which I believe sends out a strong signal to Europe. He, after all, embodies the idea of a more integrated and united Europe, where all members from north to south, east to west, are equally committed to the European project. Secondly, I'd like mainly to attract your attention to the item addressed by the Council on the Western Balkans. I think it's crucial now for the European Union to step up its presence in Bosnia and Herzegovina, the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia, Montenegro, Albania and Kosovo, because the situation is extremely difficult. It's very tough. We can see there's an atmosphere of tension arising, which points to potential conflict or even wars and clashes between countries and within them. That's why it's vital for the European Council and the Council as a whole, the Commission, in the person of the High Representative, as well as the President of the Commission, together with Parliament, to strengthen our interaction with those countries and hold out to them prospects of their being integrated in the European Union in the near future. Thank you.
Mr. Leinen for 1 minute. President Tusk, President Gentiloni, Prime Minister Gentiloni, the biggest enemy of the EU is half-heartedness and lack of clarity about European ideas. Almost no one explains to people what the benefits of the EU are and why we need the EU in the next years. The EU is simply disappearing, becoming less relevant, and then people aren't interested. The founding fathers were far bolder. So Rome could be the opportunity for a new call. The Parliament has done its homework. We have developed very clear ideas. The Commission is a little weaker with 5 scenarios and multiple choice, and I hope that the Council is not going to be even vaguer in Rome, but will really set the course that we have to take in the next years. We have created peace and freedom. Now we need to organise prosperity and security. Now, Rome might not be the time for a new EU, but it certainly has to be the time for a new movement of citizens. The whole of civil society is going to be there. Many people are going to turn up. Citizens are courageous. We need a bolder politics. Thank you.
Onorevole Gabriel, per 1 minuto.
Gabriel for 1.5 minutes.
Благодаря, господин председател. Най-напред поздравления на президента Туск. Thank you, President. First of all, congratulations to Mr. Tusk for his re-election. You will be backing up solidarity. This is a fundamental priority and value of us. Let me dwell on two elements in the Council conclusions. First of all, the neighborhood policy. Solidarity and stability in the neighboring countries are of primary importance to the stability of Europe, so we have to play a major role here. Two examples. The agreement with Algeria will enable us to deepen our strategic cooperation in view of overcoming our common challenges. Western Balkans are of primary importance. We have to demonstrate unity and reconfirm the European perspective for this region. Our actions must be more visible through specific initiatives and projects. We should not only confine ourselves to political declarations. Secondly, I should dwell on migration. The entry-exit system is a very important element, but we should also think about not fragmenting security. This would happen if some member states are not part and parcel of the Schengen area, such as Bulgaria, because we have a responsibility for the external borders. And the debate on the future of Europe has started. Let us involve as many citizens as possible. This will be a counteraction against populism. Thank you.
Sí. Hablamos del futuro de Europa.
Yes. Well, we're talking about the future of Europe, and we're talking about a whole series of scenarios that the Commission presented. And let me begin by saying that some of those scenarios shouldn't have been presented at all. They're an unacceptable U-turn and step back for the European project. I mean, there's talk of a variable speed Europe. I think we should be talking about a flexible Europe. But I agree that there does need to be a bit of flexibility when it comes to building Europe. But the problem is that, as Mr. Pittella was saying this morning, what kind of Europe do we want? I mean, some of us want a more integrated Europe, and the problem is that now we have massive differences when it comes to social and economic policy. Southern Europe is suffering. It's been suffering from economic policies during recent years, excessive austerity without a social heart. This policy that we need to carry out together needs to respond to the demands of the whole of the south of Europe for there to be economic, jobs-based and growth-based policies for the whole of Europe, because otherwise we can't have a joint Europe.
This is Oskog for 1 minute.
Herr talman.
Thank you, President. The Member States took a range of decisions at the meeting of the European Council last week, stating that economic growth should be to everyone's benefit. And the November summit should confirm our desiderata, but it falls to you as President to ensure that Parliament calls for a major social component for Europe's future. I don't think we can sign up to this declaration without there being elements setting out proper priorities regarding working conditions, energy and human rights. That those priorities will ensure we have security, justice and peace, whereas a common defence policy for Europe will not address all the challenges we face. And there are other measures that have led to an increase in tensions in Brussels. That's not what would bring us closer to our citizens.
Mr. Panier for 1 minute. President, no, European dream from 1957 isn't dead. Europe has to be present today, both as a necessity and a challenge. So first of all, let us build a European defence, and then let us continue to build effective policy to fight against terrorism, to fight against cyber terrorism. That's a major scourge for us Europeans and also for the Arab world. Let's be up to the task of human dignity that we need to see in migration. Our European dream in 2017 means change of economic paradigm, to have new growth, to have fairness in our international trade, social equity, fight against climate change by developing a circular economy and renewable energy. That's the challenge we're facing. That's the path we've got to take. That's our dream. Rome was but a start. On the 25th of March, now Rome has to be the start of a new chapter for a new Europe. We have to fight against nationalists by coming back to the hopes of Jean Monnet, our founding fathers in the past, and Jacques Delors today. Mr. Tang, for 1 minute.
Thank you, President. The commemoration of 60 years of the Rome Treaty brings us to the idea of renewal. What sort of Europe do we want? Europe has been crippled by division. We can't go along like this any longer. We're more than just a single currency. We're a unique form of democracy and inequality in the world which we can be proud of. Europe is not a country. We have unprecedented possibilities to strengthen our countries. We have to, but Europe has to recognise its weaknesses and acknowledge them. There are many roads to Rome. A combination of more and less is worth pursuing, and allowing certain countries to cooperate more is also a worthwhile idea to cope for those who want more Europe, but we still need to address exactly what Europe we want.
Well, let's move on to Catch the Eye now. Mrs. Suidrova.
Mr. President, thank you for giving me the floor. First of all, I'd like to congratulate on his election to Donald Tusk. This is a confirmation of his excellent work at the head of the European Council, but it's also a very strong signal that we need these days. It is a signal that means that member states can unite as they united to elect him, and I hope that they will also unite to adopt this declaration that was adopted at the European Council. There are 4 overall objectives that I think meet the expectations of European citizens. I also appreciate that this declaration is meant to unite member states and to unite EU citizens. Safe and secure Europe, prosperous Europe, social Europe, and Europe strong in the world. Those are objectives that are rather general, but they are crucial for maintaining the legacy that we have inherited. 60 years of peaceful EU, of peaceful Europe, that Prime Minister Gentiloni reminded us is an excellent, are excellent results.
Thank you. Honorable López Aguilar.
Mr. López Aguilar. President of the Council, last week, thousands of Europeans demonstrated in European capitals for Europe, and they showed courage, and their idea was to try and rescue Europe. They don't want a decadent, paralysed Europe, and they don't want a Europe that moves backwards. They want a Europe with more integration and fewer vetoes, and for that we need political agreements like those in Versailles. But what we're lacking is integration. We also need a more social Europe with more fiscal capacity. We need a clear message. We have an immediate challenge, which is Brexit. We have to say exactly what that means and exactly what it costs when it comes to moving away from the European project. We need to end this hypocrisy of extension, because that's a problem. I mean, Turkey and other candidates, we need to be honest about that. We need to ensure that the 60th anniversary of the founding of Europe becomes an event at which we say that we have a responsibility here. Citizens have shown what they want when they demonstrated. Mrs. Tomasic.
Thank you very much. The European Council has recognized that stability in the Western Balkans has been brought into question, and that more attention should be given to this region to prevent it from becoming once again the scene of conflict and unwanted politics. I welcome this approach, but I fear that if we're not honest with the countries in this region, it could backfire. Something similar happened with Turkey. For a long time we were promising Turkey membership, although consensus about its membership was never reached within the EU. If we wish to be honest and build our relations with this region on solid foundations, we cannot afford to ignore the facts. We cannot ignore that in one of the countries one of the aggressors is a country which is trying to become a member of the EU. This country has not fulfilled any of the given promises, and it is clear that it does not want to embrace European values, it does not want to carry out the necessary reforms, and therefore it cannot become a member of the EU yet.
Honorable Senra Rodriguez.
Mrs. Senra Rodriguez.
Sí. Gracias, Presidente.
Thank you, President. 60 years of the European Union is nothing to celebrate. While small and medium-sized farm holdings are disappearing and small-scale fisheries are being destroyed and thousands of people are still losing their jobs, while thousands and thousands of young people can find no job, and those who do find a job at all have fewer rights than the previous generation, while there are still people who are the working poor, and while the rights we acquired after years of struggle are being pulled apart, while macho terrorism is still underway, and while the peoples are being blackmailed, and while austerity policies continue to attack our public pension systems, our public education and health systems, there's nothing to celebrate. Change European policies if you really want citizens to trust Europe.
Honorable Soltes.
Mr. Soltes, please.
Thank you for the floor. The European Union is the political, economic and social project, but it broke down on the axis from the south to north and on the axis from the east to west. Because of that, the Schengen regime, the external policy and the system of solidarity and social Europe itself are jeopardized. This will not be enough to have 5 scenarios from the white paper. We have to have a new agreement on possible cooperation between European states. The Europe of several speeds or scenarios will not be in line with the founding agreements, but we need a new agreement which will take into account the opinion of our citizens if we really want their trust, confidence and support of our joint project. They have been left aside for too long, and therefore we have to listen to them now.
Castaldo.
Mr. Castaldo, please.
Thank you, President. We've heard a lot of fine words about integrated Europe based on solidarity, but it's a mystery as to how we actually achieve that. Our system is completely sclerotic. The only economic coordination up to now is austerity. Inequalities between regions of Europe have grown, and that's on top of the economic crisis. What have you done these years? The social compact, possibly, or the Juncker plan to fight against unemployment. But there is already a social clause in the treaties. There is already the legal basis. What's missing, as always, is the political will. President Juncker said earlier that when we talk about social policy, we're too mild. But that's because we're all ashamed. Everyone knows it's just words. No one dares to speak up. Prime Minister Gentiloni, unfortunately, is gone, and we actually can't really tell, was talking about confidence in of Europe, of people in the future. But the question is hanging in the air. If we completely leave weak people to themselves, there'll be no future to defend.
Ultimo intervento del Catch the Eye.
Last speaker, Mr. Pitideos.
Thank you, Chair. The discussion on the white paper is an admission of failure from the leadership of the EU, failure to address the real issues. Who would expect 60 years after the founding of the EU that the EU would be divided, that instead of having equal nation states we would have a German-dominated Europe? Who would expect a multi-speed Europe with citizens of a secondary quality? Who would expect that Greece and Italy would be flooded with millions of illegal migrants that would threaten their very existence? Who would expect that Greece would be in the 7th year of suffering in order to do the Germans' bidding? You are preparing to have a feast on the ruins of Europe. Thank you very much.
Sit down, please. Please. Sit down. For the conclusion of this debate, I think it's important to underline the important contribution of the European Parliament to the document of Rome. Now, for the Commission, the Vice President Ansip.
Honourable President Tajani, President Tusk, Minister Grech, honourable members of the European Parliament. On behalf of President Juncker, I want to thank you for your remarks and my conclusions. Firstly, the President and you mentioned the White Paper and the future of Europe. The starting point for each scenario is that the 27 member states move forward together as a union. If a member state wants to integrate itself more with others, it can do so already today. But nobody who has a willingness to go ahead will be left behind. Building a stronger Europe has been and will be an inclusive process. Secondly, about Western Balkans, about European perspective and enlargement of the European Union. When we prepared our country for EU membership, our people knew that all what we will do for ourselves. And really, all the reforms we did in Estonia, we did for ourselves, not for Brussels, for anybody else. And this is my message also to candidate countries. Enlargement of the European Union is a question about conditionality. If candidate countries will fulfil all the criteria, they will be welcome to the Union. If not, they have to try harder. Thirdly, I would like to stress the economic dimension of the conclusion. In line with the joint declaration of the leaders of the institutions, the European Council stressed the importance of advancing all files related to the single market strategies by 2018. With a digital single market, this will bring tangible benefits to citizens like the end of roaming surcharges and of unjustified geo-blocking and allowing cross-border portability. It is only with concrete action that we will create the EU of the future. I thank you all for your continued work and efforts which will make this happen. And of course, I would like to congratulate Donald Tusk because of re-election. Thank you.
Thank you. And now, in name of the European Council, Mr. Donald Tusk.
Thank you, Mr. President. First, thank you for your words of congratulations and support. It gives me the greatest satisfaction to hear them here in the European Parliament. Second, I share the views of those who want us to not celebrate in Rome, but to set a clear course for the future. Rome will be one of the stages, not the grand finale of this discussion. If this discussion should be effective, we must cooperate among the states and among the institutions. I am declaring this unequivocally and with deepest conviction. Third, the white paper, and especially the multi-speech scenario, as one of the forecasts, has sparked a lot of controversy, not only here in the Parliament, but at the same time, it has a sobering effect as a warning on those who have the weakening of the EU in mind. It is my hope that Rome will be a turning point in the reintegration of the Union. Not all politicians will be our allies, I am aware of that. But as paradoxical as it may sound, the majority of citizens of the countries governed by the Eurosceptics will be on our side. And fourth and last, Mr. Lamberts has said that I owe my re-election mainly to the fact that Mr. Kaczynski was against, that his attack on me helped me. I can only say that I find it quite natural that in critical moments we can always count on our compatriots. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. President. La discussione è chiusa.
Well, that concludes discussions on this item.
So, colleagues, can I have your attention? We come to the votes. But before that, I have to read you a short paragraph. In relation to the decision by several committees to enter into institutional negotiations pursuant to Rule 69C, paragraph 1, announced at the opening of the sitting on Monday, 13th of March, I have received no request for a vote in Parliament. The committees may therefore start negotiations. Yes, now the votes will start. There is a point of order by Mr. Carver. You have 1 minute for the point of order.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I've just returned from London following an earlier meeting with the Somaliland ambassador to the UK, who has highlighted